I've done a number of talks similar to this one. However, this was the first one that I was asked to write out a script. I typically have no trouble starting in with my journey, then tying in with whatever the purpose of the talk was. But for some reason, trying to write things out led to me spending a lot of time staring at a blank screen. I tried to start a number of different times and would come up with nothing. Why would people want to hear about me? Why would they care about anything I've ever done? Or how could any of that motivate anybody? Then in a moment of sleep depravity, it hit me. Why is not the question, it's the answer. Throughout almost every point in life, I've known what direction I was going. This doesn't mean I got onto some sort of superhighway that brought me to exactly where I am now. Quite the contrary. If you had asked me 5 years ago if I'd be chasing after a world championship in triathlon, I probably would have thought you were nuts. My dad had a huge influence on who I am today. I learned a ton from him. I ran my first 1 mile race when I was 3 years old because I wanted to be like my dad. I started wrestling at age 5 because my dad wrestled. I grew to love that sport, and that sport gave so much more to me than I would ever realize at such a young age. I think the most important thing that my dad taught me was how to set goals. I vividly remember a conversation when we were in 4th grade and I was disappointed that I didn't make the state tournament. On the way home, we had a discussion about what I wanted out of the next season, why it was important to me, and what I was going to do to accomplish that. Fast forward it to when I was 16, I worked most of the summer to be able to pay for a month-long wrestling camp. The thought of asking my parents to pay for that camp never really entered my mind. I felt that if I paid for it myself, I would have to earn the trip there. I would be more motivated to get everything I possibly could out of that experience. I was a sponge. I tried to learn everything I could and work as hard as possible while there. I thought it was going to make me a better wrestler. One of the counselors there asked me to make a list of 50 goals for the next 10 years. I took this task very seriously and ended up keeping that piece of paper in my wallet through my 26th birthday. I definitely didn't accomplish all the goals on the list. A few, like owning a house debt-free by age 26, were a little naive. However, I did have things like graduate college with a 4.0, finish my master's degree, earn a doctorate, that really helped define the direction that I wanted to go in life. As some of you may know, I'm a proud BVU alum. I graduated in 2007 with a degree in athletic training. I came to BV for 2 reasons. First, it had a great athletic training program, and second, it was one of the few athletic training programs that let you compete in a sport. Getting a degree was never a question, but I also had high aspirations in sport. I loved wrestling. I knew why I wrestled. Going to practice every day was easy. But at the conference tournament my freshman year, I ended up dislocating my hips. Suddenly, my aspirations in that sport were over. Definitely a tough time for me and one of the first low points in my life. I finished the next few years at BV really focused on doing the best I could in the classroom. I finished there, earned my master's degree from Southwest Minnesota State, and then was fortunate enough to take a position back at BVU in the athletic training program. Even more fortunate, I was able to commute and complete my doctorate while working full-time. It was definitely a grind, but I knew I wanted to move up in academia, and so I was motivated to keep pushing on. I finished my doctorate, got moved over to a tenure track position, got through midpoint review, and was ready to settle in and live happily ever after being on track to meet my career goals by age 35. But then came time for a change in direction. So backing up a few years to my 25th birthday, as I did every year, I pulled the goal sheet out of my wallet and looked at what was left on the list that I could accomplish. Really, the only thing remaining that I could go after was to compete in an Ironman triathlon. If you don't know, an Ironman is a 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike, and it's capped off with a marathon. You typically have to sign up about a year in advance, so I really only planned on doing one Ironman. Maybe I'd continue racing some of the shorter distance stuff as a hobby, but I never really thought that I would get very serious with the sport. I ended up having a good day at the first race and qualified for the World Championships as an amateur. I figured that would be my only chance to go to Hawaii, where the World Championships were held, so I decided to take that slot and do another Ironman. I ended up having a pretty good day on the Big Island, nothing groundbreaking, but that's really when my love for the sport and specifically for that distance took off. I started setting goals and trying to learn as much as I could about how to get faster. My 3rd year in the sport, I set the goal of trying to earn my elite license. I had no desire to take it and race as a professional. I just wanted to be good enough to say that I could have raced as a pro. I again qualified for the World Championships in Hawaii, so that year I set the goal of trying to win the amateur division. I had a great summer of training and really thought that this was something that I could make happen. I ended up having a great swim, but on the bike, I ended up getting a flat, and then another flat tire, and a third flat tire. Rotten luck. I literally watched my goals ride away from me. Although I look back now and I'm actually glad that it happened, it was definitely devastating at the time. To work so hard for a race for 6 months and end up with all the flat tires really stung. I knew I couldn't get the race back, but I still wanted to see how fast I could go, and the only way I could do that in a relatively short amount of time was to take my pro license. So that's the real reason I started racing professionally. I didn't think I could win races or make a living in the sport. I just wanted to see how fast I could go. My first pro race was validating for a number of different ways. I had a 30-minute PR, and I also finished 18th in a field of about 50, which told me that it wasn't such a dumb decision to start racing as a pro. So I started to realign my goals to ones that it takes to race as a professional, all while still trying to maintain my trajectory as a professor at BVU. I ended up winning my first major race in 2014, then coming back in 2015 and winning the North American Championships. At this point, I was noticing a slight change. It was becoming easier and easier to get my training done and harder to motivate myself to go to faculty meetings and grade papers at night. Now, don't get me wrong. I loved working at BV and definitely missed the classroom, but I was starting to sense that where my passion was at that point wasn't in the classroom. I couldn't admit it to myself or maybe even articulate what those feelings were. A couple days after winning the North American Championships, I was meeting with a student and helping her set up the internships over the summer. I remember telling her that the internship would really help her chase what she wanted most in life. And I took a step back and felt like I was slapped in the face. I wasn't doing that myself. I wanted a world championship. So my wife and I had some long talks, but she supported me in chasing my dreams. I turned in my resignation letter just 6 months away from being a tenured faculty member, then started racing pro. My first year racing as a pro was not the one I had planned. I crashed at the World Championships. I ended up passing out when I went back to defend my title at the North American Championships, then crashed again in Australia. I was at a very low point. My purpose for racing had changed. I'd spent the whole 20-hour flight from down under thinking about what I could do differently to get back to the way I was racing before. I realized that I was now focusing on results rather than focusing on the process that got me to where I was. I knew I had to change or I had to end competing in the sport. I went back to the why that I had when I started just getting serious in the sport. The why question doesn't just apply to sport. It applies to everything you do. I've learned that your goals that you set can really help keep your why at the forefront if you learn how to use them correctly. They can also help you figure out why certain things are important to you. Goals give direction and help you figure out what you want to do and why, but they do not have to be set in stone. You can change them as your life circumstances change. I think you need to set goals, then write out why they're important to you, but you can't stop there. You need to continually reassess and alter them as you go. As I look back at why you said the goal was important to you, has that changed? Is there something else in your life that perhaps is more important? I think there's a big difference between changing your goals and abandoning them. I believe that the difference in this is the why. Knowing your why will point you in the direction that you want to go.